History is not just written by the victors, it is written by the survivors of absolute idiocy. From armies fighting bees to lawyers fighting windows, humans are biologically programmed to make bad decisions. Here are 101 documented moments where logic left the chat and stupidity took the wheel. Reality is about to get very stupid. 1. Imagine draining an entire lake like a bathtub because of a math error. In 1980, a Texaco oil rig accidentally drilled into a salt mine under Lake Panier. The water rushed into the mine, creating a massive whirlpool that sucked in the drilling rig 11 barges and 65 acres of land. They turned a freshwater lake into a saltwater abyss in 3 hours. 2. Carl Tanzler was a radiology tech in Key West who was obsessed with a tuberculosis patient. When she died, he stole her body, preserved it with wax and coat hangers, and lived with the corpse for 7 years. He even built a spaceship in his yard, hoping to fly her rotting body to the stratosphere to revive her. Love makes people do crazy things, but this is a felony. 3. In 1992, Pepsi launched a lottery in the Philippines, announcing that whoever found the number 349 under their bottle cap would win 1,000,000 pesos. A computer glitch printed that number on 800,000 caps instead of just 2. Thousands of people rioted firebomb delivery trucks and sued the company for the money they did not have. 4. There was a legendary amusement park in New Jersey called Action Park that was essentially a death trap with no rules. Their famous cannonball loop slide had to be shut down because the physics were wrong and test dummies came out missing their heads. When they sent people down, it mostly just knocked out their teeth and lacerated their backs. 5. During the Napoleonic Wars, the citizens of Hartlepool, England found a shipwrecked monkey on the beach, dressed in a tiny military uniform. Having never seen a Frenchman before, the locals decided this hairy creature must be a French spy. They held a full trial, convicted the monkey of espionage, and publicly hanged it on the beach. 6. You think drunk driving is bad, but Thomas Fitzpatrick took it to the next level. He made a bar bet that he could get from New Jersey to New York in 15 minutes, so he stole a plane and landed it on the street right in front of the bar. 2 years later, he did it again because another patron did not believe the story. 7. The U.S. Air Force seriously proposed a top-secret plan in 1958 called Project A-1019. The genius idea was to detonate a nuclear bomb on the surface of the moon. The goal was simply to make a giant flash visible from Earth to flex on the Soviet Union. Luckily, they canceled it because they realized radioactive moon dust falling on Earth was bad PR. 8. Boston Corbett is the soldier who killed John Wilkes Booth, but he was also completely insane. Years before the Civil War, he was propositioned by 2 prostitutes and decided the only way to avoid temptation was to use a pair of scissors to castrate himself. He then went to a prayer meeting and ate dinner before finally going to a doctor. 9. In court, a defendant named Dennis Newton fired his lawyer because he wanted to cross-examine the witness himself. The witness pointed at Newton and identified him as the robber. Newton immediately shouted, "I should have blown your head off at the bank." He paused, realized what he said, and the judge just stared at him before sentencing him to 30 years. 10. Victorian doctors invented a device called the anti-eating mask to help people lose weight. It was a wire cage that locked around your head, preventing you from chewing, but allowing you to breathe. It looked like a medieval torture device, but people actually paid money to wear it because having a locked cage on your face is easier than just eating a salad. 11. Speed was everything in surgery before anesthesia, but Robert Liston took it too far. He moved his knife so fast during an amputation that he accidentally sliced off his assistant's fingers along with the patient's leg. Both died of infection, and a spectator died of shock, making it the only surgery with a 300% mortality rate. 12. Imagine being so rich and stupid you accidentally invent a cult. Lord Timothy Dexter shipped coal to Newcastle, a massive coal mining city, just because rivals told him to as a joke. He arrived during a miners' strike and sold the coal for a fortune. The man failed upwards harder than anyone in history. 13. A Brazilian priest wanted to break a flight record, so he tied 1,000 helium balloons to a lawn chair and took off. He forgot to learn how to use a GPS or check the wind direction. He drifted out into the open ocean, and despite having a satellite phone, he did not know how to use it to call for help. 14. During Prohibition, the US government was annoyed that people were still drinking industrial alcohol, so they ordered companies to add lethal poisons to it. They thought people would stop drinking, but Americans just drank the poison anyway. Up to 10,000 people died because the government decided to murder citizens to teach them a lesson about sobriety. 15. There was a guy named Eben Byers who drank a health tonic called Radithor, which was made of pure radium water. He drank 1,400 bottles because he thought it gave him energy. He stopped only when his jaw literally fell off and his bones began to disintegrate inside his body. 16. Mary Toft convinced top doctors in 1726 that she was giving birth to rabbits. She would shove animal parts up herself and then deliver them in front of medical experts who somehow believed this was biologically possible. The king's own surgeon fell for it until someone found her buying rabbits at the local market. 17. The 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis was a fever dream of incompetence. The winner hitched a ride in a car for 11 miles, and the guy who came in fourth had eaten rat poison as a performance enhancer. Another runner was chased a mile off course by wild dogs, making it less a race and more a survival horror game. 18. A Six Flags park used to have a haunted house where a hanging corpse was just a prop. Then a crew member from the $6 Million Man show moved the prop and its arm snapped off, revealing human bone. It was the actual mummified body of outlaw Elmer McCurdy that had been used as a carnival decoration for 60 years. 19. The town of Hallstatt in Austria had to hire bouncers for their church because tourists would not stop taking selfies during funerals. It turns out that having over 1 million Instagram influencers visit a tiny village of 700 people creates a literal zombie apocalypse of rude behavior. 20. Thomas Migsley Jr. might be the deadliest inventor ever. He gave us leaded gasoline and CFCs, effectively poisoning 3 generations and destroying the ozone layer. Ironically, he was killed by his own invention, a pulley system for his bed that strangled him. Karma finally caught up with the man who gassed the planet. 21. In 1998, a Georgian man found 2 portable heat sources in the woods and used them as heaters for a campfire. They were actually abandoned Soviet radiothermal generators powered by strontium-90. He and his friends got massive radiation burns because they tried to warm their hands on nuclear waste. 22. In 1913, the U.S. Postal Service started offering parcel post, and Americans immediately tested the limits. A couple in Ohio literally mailed their 8-month-old son to his grandmother because it was cheaper than a train ticket. It cost 15 cents in stamps and was technically legal until the postmaster had to ban mailing babies. 23. You think your commute is bad, but traffic in Beijing once got stuck for 12 days. The jam was 60 miles long and drivers moved about 2 miles per day. Vendors started selling instant noodles to stranded drivers at triple the price, creating a microeconomy fueled entirely by road rage and boredom. 24. A lawyer named Clement Vallandigham shot himself in court while demonstrating how the victim might have accidentally shot himself. The good news is, he won the case because his demonstration was so convincing. The bad news is he died from the gunshot wound moments later. Talk about commitment to the client. 25. British naval signal codes were once stolen by the French, so the British invented new codes involving flags. The problem was they picked colors that looked identical at a distance. Ships spent months shouting confused messages at each other, or just crashing because nobody knew if the flag meant turn left or make tea. 26. Listen to this genius marketing plan from the 1950s. A vacuum company released a hovering vacuum cleaner that floated on a cushion of exhaust air. It was loud, heavy, and blew the dust you were trying to clean all over the room. It was basically a leaf blower aimed at your carpet. 27. A man in California sued himself for $5 million because he hit himself in the eye with a boomerang. He claimed the boomerang was defective because it came back. He actually tried to claim the money from his own insurance policy, arguing that his own negligence caused his own injury. 28. During the construction of a skyscraper in New York, engineers realized the building would blow over in a strong wind because the bolts were in the wrong place. They had to secretly weld massive steel plates at night during a hurricane season, hoping the public and the city inspectors would not notice the potential disaster. 29. In 1631, a printing company in London published the Wicked Bible. They accidentally omitted the word "not" from the seventh commandment, making it read, "Thou shalt commit adultery." The king was furious, fined the printers heavily, and burned almost every copy for turning a sin into a divine order. 30. Project Habakkuk was a serious British plan to build an aircraft carrier out of ice and wood pulp. They thought a frozen ship would be unsinkable and cheap. They spent millions testing it before realizing that even reinforced ice melts when you put hot engines on it and sail it into the summer sun. 31. In 1944, the US military actually thought pigeons were the future of missile guidance. Project Pigeon involved training birds to peck at enemy ships on a screen inside the nose of a missile. The military scrapped it not because it did not work, but because no general wanted to stake his career on a suicide squad of birds. 32. The Erfurt latrine disaster of 1184 is exactly what it sounds like. King Henry VI held a meeting in a church with dozens of nobles. The wooden floor could not handle the weight and collapsed, dumping 60 of the most powerful men in Europe into a massive liquid cesspit below where they drowned in human filth. 33. William George Crush worked for a railroad and thought staging a train crash would be a fun spectator sport. He smashed 2 locomotives together at full speed in front of 40,000 people. The boilers exploded, launching shrapnel into the crowd, killing 3 people and blinding others. He was fired and rehired the next day because ticket sales were great. 34. German submarine U-1206 sank because the captain did not know how to flush the toilet. The sub had a complicated high-pressure plumbing system, and the captain turned the wrong valve while deep underwater. This flooded the batteries with seawater and forced the crew to surface right in front of the British Navy because of a bathroom break. 35. The Spanish basketball team at the 2000 Paralympics won gold in the intellectual disability category. It was a heartwarming moment until someone revealed that 10 of the 12 players had no disability whatsoever. They were just regular guys who faked medical tests to crush genuinely disabled opponents. They had to return the medals in shame. 36. The OSS tried to psych out Japanese troops during World War II with Operation Fantasia. The plan was to paint foxes with glow-in-the-dark paint and release them to simulate ghosts. The foxes just licked the paint off and got sick, while the Japanese soldiers likely just wondered why the Americans were throwing wet foxes at them. 37. London suffered a beer flood in 1814 when a massive vat of porter burst at a brewery. 320,000 gallons of dark beer smashed through the slum, drowning 8 people in alcohol. The judge ruled it an act of God, so the victims' families got zero compensation, but the brewery got a tax break for the lost beer. 38. Tycho Brahe was a brilliant astronomer with a fatal flaw called politeness. He attended a royal banquet and refused to leave the table to use the bathroom because it was considered rude. His bladder literally burst from holding it in, and he died in agony 11 days later. Always pee when you have the chance. 39. The French national railway operator ordered 2,000 new trains in 2014 worth 15 billion euros. After the purchase, they realized the new trains were too wide for 1,300 station platforms across the country. They had to spend another 50 million just to shave down the concrete edges of every station. 40. The USS William D. Porter is the unluckiest ship in naval history. In 1943, during a drill, the crew forgot to disarm a torpedo and accidentally fired a live round directly at the battleship carrying President Roosevelt. They missed, but the entire crew was arrested and the ship became a floating joke until it sank. 41. A waitress at Hooters won a sales contest where the promised prize was a brand new Toyota. On the big day, the manager blindfolded her and led her to the parking lot where he handed her a plastic Yoda doll from Star Wars. She did not laugh, but she did sue the company and won enough money to buy any car she wanted. 42. Cleveland thought releasing 1.5 million balloons at once would be a fun world record in 1986. Instead, the helium mass created an impenetrable cloud that shut down the airport and prevented the Coast Guard from finding 2 drowning fishermen. The city faced millions in lawsuits for littering the entire state. 43. Pope Stephen VI hated his predecessor, Pope Formosus, so much that he dug up his rotting corpse for a trial. He propped the dead body on a throne, screamed at it, and found it guilty of perjury. He then cut off the corpse's fingers and threw it in the river. Unsurprisingly, the people of Rome rioted and strangled Stephen shortly after. 44. A Toronto lawyer with a twisted sense of humor left a massive fortune in his will to whichever woman could birth the most legal children in 10 years. This triggered the Great Stork Derby, where families churned out babies like factories. 4 women tied with 9 babies each and split the cash. 45. In 1976, the U.S. military launched Operation Paul Bunyan to cut down a single poplar tree in the Korean DMZ. To trim this one tree, they sent 800 soldiers attack helicopters and nuclear-capable bombers. It was the most expensive and aggressive landscaping job in human history just to prove a point. 46. In 1797, the French tried to invade Britain by landing in Wales. The soldiers got drunk on looted wine and then surrendered to a group of local women. The French mistook the women's traditional tall black hats and red shawls for the uniforms of elite British grenadiers. They were defeated by fashion. 47. In 1986, a reporter joked on TV that there was no bread in the stores, causing a panic where everyone bought all the bread. Wait, that is boring. Let's talk about the Tsar tank. The Russians built a tank with wheels 3 stories high. It looked terrifying, but the engine was too weak, so it got stuck in the mud during its first test and rusted there for 7 years. 48. The town of Rothenburg in Germany has a legend that they were saved from destruction during the 30 Years' War by a drinking contest. The enemy general agreed to spare the town if the mayor could chug a massive 3-liter tankard of wine in one go. The mayor did it, save the town, and then slept for 3 days. 49. During the siege of Weinsberg in 1140, the king agreed to let the women leave the castle with whatever they could carry on their backs. He expected them to take jewelry and clothes. Instead, the women walked out carrying their husbands on their backs. The king was so impressed by the loophole that he let everyone go. 50. Mauro Prosperi was an endurance runner who got lost in the Sahara Desert for 9 days during a marathon. He survived by drinking his own urine and eating raw bats found in an abandoned shrine. He tried to slit his wrist to end the suffering, but he was so dehydrated his blood had thickened and clotted, saving his life against his will. 51. In the 80s, the A&W restaurant chain tried to compete with the McDonald's Quarter Pounder by launching a third pounder at the same price. It failed miserably because American customers were bad at math. Focus groups revealed that people refused to buy it because they thought 1/3 was smaller than 1/4. 52. Operation Cottage was a U.S. invasion of the island of Kiska during World War II. In heavy fog, American and Canadian troops stormed the beaches and engaged in a brutal firefight, killing over 300 men. When the fog finally lifted, they realized the Japanese had secretly evacuated weeks ago, and they had just been shooting at each other. 53. In 1922, New York City exploded into violence known as the Straw Hat Riots. There was an unwritten fashion rule that men could not wear straw hats after September 15th. Mobs of teenagers roamed the streets, snatching hats and beating up anyone who broke the fashion code, triggering a massive police response. 54. Jimmy Heselden. The millionaire owner of the Segway company died in the most ironic way possible. He was riding one of his own rugged off-road Segways near his estate. He politely moved over to let a dog walker pass, lost control of the self-balancing scooter, and drove it straight off a cliff. 55. During the Great Whiskey Fire of Dublin, in 1875, a burning river of alcohol flowed through the streets. 13 people died, but not from burns or smoke. They died of alcohol poisoning because they grabbed dirty pots and boots to drink the free burning whiskey straight off the cobblestones. 56. The French cavalry once pulled off the weirdest victory in naval history. In 1795, the Dutch fleet was frozen in ice near Texel. French horsemen simply galloped across the frozen sea and surrounded the ships. The Dutch admiral had to surrender his mighty warships to a bunch of guys on horses. 57. During World War II, the U.S. developed bat bombs by strapping tiny incendiary devices to Mexican free-tailed bats. The plan backfired during testing when the armed bats escaped and roosted under the eaves of the brand-new airbase. They burned the general's car and the entire hangar to the ground before ever seeing combat. 58. King Darius of Persia was the ultimate drama queen. When a storm destroyed his bridge across the Hellespont, he ordered his soldiers to punish the ocean. They had to whip the water 300 times and throw shackles into the sea to arrest it for being disobedient. He literally tried to torture water. 59. George C. Parker was the greatest salesman in New York history because he successfully sold the Brooklyn Bridge to tourists twice a week. He convinced gullible visitors that they could own the bridge and set up toll booths. Police had to constantly stop random people from erecting barriers on a bridge they thought they had bought. 60. El Salvador and Honduras went to war in 1969, and the final trigger was a World Cup qualifying soccer match. Tensions were already high, but the violence in the stands spilled over into bombing raids and a ground invasion. It is known as the Football War, and 3,000 people died over a game. 61. In 2012, Canadian thieves pulled off the most culturally stereotypical crime ever. They stole $18 million worth of maple syrup from the Global Strategic Maple Syrup Reserve. They siphoned the syrup into barrels and replaced it with water, and nobody noticed until the barrels started wobbling because they were too light. 62. In 1994, the U.S. Air Force Wright Laboratory seriously proposed a gay bomb. It was a chemical weapon that would release powerful aphrodisiacs over enemy troops. The goal was to make enemy soldiers incredibly attracted to each other so they would stop fighting and start making love. The Pentagon sadly rejected the proposal. 63. President Andrew Jackson kept a 1,400-pound wheel of cheese in the White House lobby for 2 years. It smelled absolutely horrific, so to get rid of it, he invited the public to eat it. A mob of thousands stormed the White House and devoured the giant cheese block in 2 hours, leaving only the smell. 64. Henry Ford tried to build a utopian American town in the middle of the Amazon rainforest called Fordlandia. He forced Brazilian workers to eat American hamburgers and participate in square dancing, which caused a violent riot. The jungle eventually reclaimed the entire town, and Ford never even visited his expensive failure. 65. A scientist from the U.S. Weather Bureau once suggested using nuclear weapons to stop hurricanes. The brilliant idea was to disrupt the eye of the storm with a massive atomic explosion. Fortunately, cooler heads prevailed, realizing that a radioactive hurricane raining nuclear fallout on Florida was probably worse than just some wind and rain. 66. Since 1980, there has been an annual race in Wales called Man vs. Horse. Humans run 22 miles against actual horses. The craziest part is that humans have actually won the race on multiple occasions, proving that on long distances people are just stubborn enough to outrun livestock. 67. The British battleship HMS Victoria sank because the admiral ordered a formation that was geometrically impossible. The captains knew the ships would collide, but were too afraid to question the order because of strict naval etiquette. They turned towards each other and rammed the flagship, sinking it in minutes, all because of politeness. 68. Marshal Zhukov of the Soviet Union loved Coca-Cola, but could not be seen drinking a symbol of American capitalism. So he asked Coke to make a clear version that looked like vodka. Coke actually obliged and produced colorless white Coke in special bottles, just so the general could enjoy a fizzy drink without getting executed. 69. The U.S. Army created the Camel Corps in 1856, importing dozens of camels to Texas to haul supplies. The camels worked perfectly, but they spit on officers and terrified the horses. During the Civil War, everyone just kind of forgot about them and let them loose to confuse cowboys in the desert for decades. 70. John Leonard saw a Pepsi commercial offering a Harrier fighter jet for 7 million Pepsi points. He found a loophole to buy points for 10 cents each and sent Pepsi a check for $700,000. Pepsi had to go to court to argue that no reasonable person would expect a military jet from a soda company. 71. American Airlines offered an unlimited lifetime first-class pass in 1981, thinking nobody would fly that much. One guy named Steve Rothstein flew 30 million miles, costing the airline $20 million. He treated airplanes like taxis to get a sandwich in Paris, and they finally had to sue him to stop the bleeding. 72. Boston was once destroyed by a tsunami of molasses. A massive storage tank burst in 1919, sending a 25-foot wave of sticky syrup through the streets at 35 miles per hour. It killed 21 people, and locals claim that on hot summer days the neighborhood still smells like sweet death. 73. Silicon Valley investors poured $100 million into Juicero, a $400 Wi-Fi connected juice press. It turned out the expensive machine was useless because you could just squeeze the proprietary juice packets with your bare hands faster than the robot. It is the Mona Lisa of useless over-engineering. 74. Switzerland has been neutral for centuries, but in 2007, they accidentally invaded Liechtenstein. A company of 170 Swiss soldiers got lost in a thunderstorm and wandered a mile across the border. Liechtenstein did not even notice they had been invaded until the Swiss government called to apologize. 75. During World War I, British troops tried to invade German East Africa, but disturbed massive hives of angry killer bees. The Battle of Tonga ended with both armies dropping their weapons and running away from the insects. The bees were the most effective soldiers on the field that day and took 0 casualties. 76. A house painter tried to assassinate President Andrew Jackson with 2 pistols. Both guns misfired due to humidity, which is a 1 in 125,000 chance. The 67-year-old president then beat the assassin nearly to death with his cane while his own security guards had to pull Jackson off the shooter. 77. Medieval Europe took law and order so seriously that they put animals on trial. In 1386, a pig in France was arrested for attacking a child. The pig was actually given a lawyer-stood trial. In a courtroom was found guilty by a judge and publicly executed in the town square. 78. Before the 1956 Olympics, a student named Barry Larkin protested the torch relay. He ran through Sydney with a burning pair of underwear attached to a chair leg. The police protected him thinking it was the real flame, and the mayor even gave a speech to the burning underpants before realizing the prank. 79. King Frederick the Great wanted Germans to eat potatoes, but they refused to touch the dirty tubers. So he declared potatoes a royal vegetable and posted guards around the field. Peasants thought anything worth guarding must be valuable and immediately started stealing and planting the potatoes just like the king planned. 80. During a nuclear test in 1957, a scientist calculated that the explosion shot a steel manhole cover into the air at 130,000 miles per hour. It was likely the first man-made object to leave the atmosphere, beating Sputnik to space by months just by pure accidental brute force. 81. The dictator of Turkmenistan decided he hated the color black, so he banned all black cars in the capital city. Citizens were forced to repaint their vehicles white or silver at their own expense because the president thought white brought good luck. It is basically the world's most expensive feng shui enforcement. 82. Coca-Cola tried to launch Dasani water in the UK, but failed to check the local slang. Their slogan mentioned being full of spunk, which means courage in America, but implies bodily fluids in Britain. Then it was revealed the water was just treated tap water, and the brand was pulled immediately. 83. NASA held an online contest to name a new module on the International Space Station. The internet overwhelmingly voted to name it Colbert, after the comedian Stephen Colbert. NASA refused to let a comedian own a room in space and boringly named it Tranquility, instead proving democracy does not work in zero gravity. 84. The 30 Years' War. One of the deadliest conflicts in history started because Bohemian rebels threw 3 Catholic officials out of a castle window. They survived the 70-foot fall because they landed in a massive pile of manure. The Catholics claimed angels saved them, while the rebels claimed the poop saved them. 85. In the early 1900s, men were terrified of the long, sharp pins women used to secure their massive hats. City councils passed laws shortening hat pins because men claimed women were using them as swords in arguments. It was a literal panic over weaponized fashion accessories. 86. When Joseph Stalin suffered a stroke, he lay on the floor for hours because his guards were too terrified to enter his room without permission. He had executed so many people for minor offenses that his own security team let him die rather than risk disturbing his nap. Paranoia literally killed him. 87. In 1973, a group of British friends wanted to race motorsports, but cars were too expensive. They founded the British Lawn Mower Racing Association. It is now a serious sport where people remove the blades and drive lawnmowers at 50 miles per hour just to prove that men will race literally anything with an engine. 88. The Soviet Union trained anti-tank dogs during World War II to run under German tanks with explosives. The problem was they trained the dogs using their own Soviet diesel tanks. On the battlefield, the dogs ignored the German gasoline tanks and ran back to blow up the Russian tanks instead. 89. In 1858, London smelled so bad from untreated sewage in the Thames that Parliament had to soak their curtains in chloride of lime just to hold a session. They finally built a sewer system not to save lives from cholera, but because the politicians could not handle the smell of their own city. 90. A Florida couple paid for their house in cash, but Bank of America kept trying to foreclose on them due to a clerical error. The couple sued one, and when the bank refused to pay their legal fees, the couple showed up with movers and a sheriff to foreclose on the bank branch itself. 91. During the Cold War, British engineers designed nuclear landmines to stop a Soviet invasion, but realized the cold winter ground would freeze the electronics. Their official top-secret solution was to seal live chickens inside the bomb casing to keep the components warm with body heat. It was literally a nuclear weapon powered by poultry. 92. In 1910, author Virginia Woolf and her friends put on fake beards and blackface to pose as Abyssinian royals. They tricked the Royal Navy into giving them a VIP tour of the HMS Dreadnought. The officers were so polite, they did not realize the royals were speaking gibberish mixed with broken Swahili. 93. The U.S. Congress seriously debated a bill in 1910 to import hippopotamuses to the swamps of Louisiana. The plan was to solve a national meat shortage by farming hippos for food. We were literally one vote away from lake cow bacon becoming a staple of the American breakfast. 94. A man named Benjamin Carruthers sued Red Bull for false advertising because he had been drinking it for 10 years and did not grow wings or improve his athletic performance. The company actually settled the lawsuit for $13 million to avoid a trial proving that taking metaphors literally can be very profitable. 95. In 2015, the Irish Court of Appeal accidentally legalized ecstasy, ketamine, and crystal meth for 24 hours. A loophole in a court ruling voided existing drug laws, and Parliament could not pass an emergency fix until the next day. For one glorious night, Ireland was technically the highest nation on Earth. 96. During World War II, the U.S. Army deployed the Ghost Army, a unit made up of artists and designers. They used inflatable rubber tanks, massive speakers playing sound effects, and fake radio traffic to trick the Germans. They saved thousands of lives by fighting the Nazis with balloons and acting skills. 97. In 1997, a cargo ship was hit by a rogue wave and lost a container filled with 5 million Lego pieces. Ironically, many of the kits were sea-themed like pirates and divers. To this day, plastic octopuses and scuba gear are still washing up on beaches in Cornwall in a never-ending plastic shipwreck. 98. The CIA spent 5 years and $20 million on Operation Acoustic Kitty. They surgically implanted a microphone into a cat to spy on the Soviets. On its very first field test, they released the cat near a park bench and it was immediately run over by a taxi. That is $20 million of tax money flat on the pavement. 99. In 1958, the KKK tried to hold a rally to intimidate the Lumbee Native American tribe in North Carolina. The tribe showed up armed and encircled the Klan, shooting into the air. The terrified Klansmen dropped their robes and fled into the swamps in one of history's most satisfying retreats. 100. Zaire tried to start a space program in the 70s with the help of a German company. They built a massive rocket on a jungle plateau. On launch day, it lifted off about 20 feet, wobbled uncontrollably, and crashed into a cliff. The dictator was so embarrassed he banned anyone from ever mentioning it again. 101. In 1983, Soviet officer Stanislav Petrov saw a radar warning that the U.S. had launched 5 nuclear missiles. Protocol demanded he launch a full nuclear counterstrike, destroying the world. He decided it was a glitch and did nothing. You are alive right now watching this video only because one guy trusted his gut. That was 101 reasons why aliens lock their doors when they fly past Earth. Now I want your confession. What is the single most idiotic thing you have ever done that should have killed you but didn't? I am reading every comment to see who beats the guy with the lawn chair balloons. Hit like to validate my existence and subscribe for more chaos.